Shadow Hack. Chapter 661, Borrowing Soldiers from Elsewhere. Leda was feeling extremely regretful of his choices when the Fluxers protecting the city reported an unfortunate news to him. Vampires have fallen. Upon hearing their words, Leda felt as if a bomb had exploded in his head. All because of his mistake, vampires had fallen. Not only that, but Lucky Wind City was also thrown into a grave crisis. He held his head, not daring to believe it. The Grand Lucky Wind City was on the verge of collapse because of a lapse in his judgment. The news of the vampires being annihilated was a great psychological blow to him. Once the vampires swore a sacred oath, they and Lucky Wind City became like feathers of the same bird. So who could have anticipated that all of a sudden the vampires would be annihilated? Looking at the head of their leader, Leda hated that he was unable to rush out and chop the frontline god into different parts. Don't be impulsive, General. Leda was sobbing spasmodically. If it were not for the people obstructing his path, he would have rushed out a long time ago. But the aftermath of that was too horrible to imagine. He was Li Yunmu's shadow, so if he sacrificed his life, it would be the greatest disrespect to Li Yunmu. It might also influence Lin Yuero's position in Li Yunmu's heart. Leda didn't know whether Lin Yuero was quickly rushing toward Lucky Wind City. But if he allowed her to see the miserable state of the city, she would probably cough blood. Yet the vampires had been annihilated, and at the gate of the city, the Fluxers of frontline god and divine religion were rampaging. They had superiority in numbers and power, so they would naturally continue pressing on. But Lucky Wind City wasn't watching idly either. Countless Fluxers and supreme transcending level experts were dispatched to stop the enemy. Despite their losses were a lot heavier, their opposition didn't proceed unscathed either. Although Leda was completely devoted and loyal to Li Yunmu, he wasn't meant to be a general. He could not achieve effortless victory like Lin Yuero, nor could he use strategies like her. He could only send out people to obstruct the people of divine religion and frontline heavens. But the more they attacked like that, the easier it was for them to fall into a passive state. After all, their losses were becoming heavier and heavier. If Li Yunmu saw the state to which Lucky Wind City had been pushed, he would feel extremely pained. Who could say how much blood and sweat he had invested in the supreme transcending level experts of Lucky Wind City? Yet after such an enormous crisis, the price required to return to the previous state was hard to imagine. Just as Lin Yuero returned to Lucky Wind City, she discovered that the entire city was surrounded by experts from other powers. Instantly, her complexion changed and she quickly stopped the supreme transcending level experts behind her. They all quickly concealed themselves in a hidden region. The supreme transcending level experts looked at Lin Yuero suspiciously and asked, "City Lord, what's the matter? Why aren't we returning? Lucky Wind City is in a crisis. If we return now, we would just be courting death." "What do you mean?" Lin Yuero took a deep breath and stated, "We need to leave and borrow soldiers from the Four Saints. If we return without an army, we would only send ourselves to an early death." The supreme transcending level experts nodded, and one of them said, "The matters of the other territory are under the control of General Li Tian." Lin Yuero calmly nodded. "Li Feng and Li Yun still haven't returned. I sent them to keep a watch on frontline heavens and divine religion, but it seems like they encountered some difficulty. The people at the city's gate are probably from frontline heavens and divine religion." "How do you know?" "There has been no news from Li Yun and Li Feng, and we also haven't heard of them returning to Lucky Wind City. But their safety doesn't matter. They are both Li Yunmu's shadows, so they won't be in any life-threatening crisis. We must focus on finding Li Tian and borrowing soldiers from the Four Saints." It was the first time that Lucky Wind City faced such a crisis. When Lin Yuero arrived at the destination, Li Tian was somewhat overwhelmed by the favor from his superior, believing that Lin Yuero had hurried over with people to see him. Who knew that the first sentence out of her mouth would be, "I have come to ask for manpower." Lucky Wind City has encountered an enormous crisis. Crisis? Impossible. Isn't second eldest defending Lucky Wind City? How could any accident occur? We have personally confirmed it. There's no mistake, said one of the supreme transcending level experts behind Lin Yuero. After hearing the words of the supreme transcending level expert, Li Tian was stunned. Lucky Wind City was the place where their master had decided to build his foundation. If it was lost, they would become homeless and destitute, and their quest to become the hegemons of Earth would also lose all meaning. Li Tian led Lin Yuero to find the four saints, but those guys surprisingly forgot their promises and turned their backs on Lin Yuero. After hearing that Lucky Wind City had fallen into a crisis, all of them evaded responsibility by avoiding to meet Lin Yuero. You forgot about the kindness shown by the city lord before? Now that Lucky Wind City is facing a disaster, you actually choose to abandon your benefactor. Lin Yuero took a deep breath and said, never mind. We cannot hope that everyone will be loyal to their allies like us. She turned around and walked away while saying, Li Tian, return with us. There is no more meaning in you protecting this place. The four saints have already broken away from our control. Li Tian was somewhat unwilling and greatly desired to ferret out the four saints and beat them up. But doing that was meaningless. As Lin Yuero had said, their main priority right then was to assist Lucky Wind City in eliminating the crisis. When they returned to the vicinity of Lucky Wind City and saw the countless fluxers surrounding it, Li Tian's heart sank. If the current situation continued to progress, Lucky Wind City would be truly defeated. Lin Yuero led the few supreme transcending level experts to the base of vampires, but to their surprise, they couldn't find a single person there. Could it be that they had ran away? Lin Yuero clenched her teeth. Even if she knew strategy and war tactics, without any soldiers or army, she would just be courting death by herself. One cannot make bricks without straw, so how could she fight a war without an army? Lin Yuero took a deep breath. Lucky Wind City is in trouble. We have no one to rely upon except ourselves. Unfortunately, with the few people we have, trying to get past the enemy at the gate of the city would be nothing more than taking quick road to our deaths. The supreme transcending level experts dispatched by Lin Yuero returned at that instant and shared the information they had obtained. Chapter 662, The Appearance of the Mythical Realm. City Lord, I have made discreet inquiries and found some information. Frontline heavens and divine religion are the ones attacking our Lucky Wind City. Moreover, I have obtained another piece of information: the vampires have fallen. Lin Yuero's eyes went wide and, with incredulity on her face, she asked, what are you saying? The vampires were annihilated. No wonder then that there was no one at their base. They had died on the battlefield, so she had blamed them wrongly. But that wasn't important at present. The question in front of Lin Yuero was how she could force the people of divine religion and frontline heaven to retreat and vanquish the threat they posed toward Lucky Wind City. Or how she could enter Lucky Wind City herself. These were her current targets. How about we ask for assistance from other powers? Li Tian said. Lin Yuero shook her head. She felt that this was the most useless option among the ones in front of her. Before Li Yunmu had departed, he suppressed all the powers with his formidable strength, which was why none of those people would assist Lucky Wind City. Moreover, who knew how many different powers were eyeing Lucky Wind City covetously? They were certainly waiting for it to encounter some mishap. That was the biggest obstruction in the path of Lucky Wind City to become the overlord of Earth. But what Lin Yuero couldn't understand was how frontline heavens and divine religion could attack. She left the city. Her complexion suddenly changed. There was definitely a mole in the city. He had informed the enemy that had led to this situation. City Lord, we don't have time. Do you truly wish to watch without doing anything as Lucky Wind City is defeated? I am more worried than you. But what's the use of being worried? We must remain calm and think of a countermeasure. Lin Yuero bellowed furiously. Relying on the few people we gave, how could we contend against that large army? I know Lucky Wind City is in great crisis and I have already thought of a way, Li Tian suddenly said. How about we ask for assistance from Ocean Temple? They have always been neutral, and Master had never been enemies with Ocean Emperor. Lucky Wind City is facing difficulties right now, so he would assist us, right? Lin Yuero shook her head and said, Ocean Emperor is an extremely careful and prudent person. He won't send his soldiers to fight against frontline heaven and divine religion for Lucky Wind City, which is completely unrelated to him. Not to mention that his territory is quite close to that of divine religion. If Pope learned that Lucky Wind City was being assisted by Ocean Temple, then I fear that he would start a fight with him. Since Ocean Emperor has always maintained neutrality, he must certainly possess great intelligence, and he would never take the risk to assist us. Obtaining help from him is probably more difficult than scaling the heavens. Hearing Lin Yuero's insistence, almost everyone was frustrated. They couldn't do this, they couldn't do that. So what exactly could they do? Lin Yuero took a deep breath and said, now we can only rely on ourselves. I have a plan, but I don't know whether it will work or not. I will talk to the senior residing in my body. Senior, is it convenient to talk to you now? Girl, what are you thinking? Said Illusion God, who had entered Lin Yuero's body, while laughing heartily. I am presently the Illusion God, but can I use the mythical realm to temporarily trap the army over there? The old man smiled slightly. Girl, the mythical realm can only be entered willingly to be effective. If you forcefully control it to trap them, then I am afraid that it can only be maintained for a short period of time instead of eternally trapping everyone inside. After obtaining the assurance from the old man, Lin Yuero nodded. I understand. As long as I can trap them for a while, it will be enough. We must return to Lucky Wind City first. As long as there is still a soldier or a weapon which I can control left in Lucky Wind City, I will catch them all in one swoop. Lin Yuero's words were filled with confidence, which caused the old man to say with a slight smile, now you are the Illusion God, if you want to control that mythical realm, won't it be an easy feat for you? The old man didn't say anything further and Lin Yuero began to explain her plan to the supreme transcending level expert near her. Here. I can only control the mythical realm for a period of time so we can safely return to Lucky Wind City. As long as we go back, everything can be discussed later. Hearing Lin Yuero's words, the supreme transcending level experts nodded in agreement. With her using the mythical realm, the army before Lucky Wind City would be trapped inside it for a time. However, they didn't know how long it would last. Li Tian charged toward Lucky Wind City while leading the supreme transcending level experts and Lin Yuero. Frontline God felt somewhat abnormal when the gazes of his fluxers turned completely hollow. He lifted his head to look around and discovered that the scene of attack on Lucky Wind City had changed all of a sudden. What was going on? Could everything from just a moment ago have been a dream? If that was true, he had to wake up as soon as possible. Otherwise, he wasn't sure whether he would Lucky Wind City or not. But he still felt that something was abnormal. As the surrounding fluxers sank into chaos, his complexion changed. He knew what he had encountered, it was a mythical realm. Could it be that some illusion master had appeared? The world surprisingly still had too many damned illusion masters. After thinking this, he yelled at the surrounding fluxers, "Don't lose your heads. This is only an illusion. If we get confused by this mythical realm, we won't have the right to be known as soldiers of frontline heavens." Frontline God's words made everyone take control of themselves. They didn't want to be looked down upon by him, so they had to calm their minds. After all, Lucky Wind City, which had always put pressure on them, was about to be destroyed. However, what they didn't know was that Lin Yuero had already returned and was the greatest threat to them in Lucky Wind City. She had come out of the mythical realm and had turned as an illusion god, which was something Frontline God had never anticipated. Under the protection of the supreme transcending level experts and Li Tian, Lin Yuero re-entered Lucky Wind City. When she returned, her expression turned gloomy. She realized that at that moment, Lucky Wind City was under attack from both inside and outside. Chapter 663, is this funny to you? The battle between the different gods was completely different from the last time. Back then, the Scandinavian God Council hadn't attacked since Li Yunmu had taken the stage by himself. But this time, they had to attack, and it caused a great commotion. The battle between the numerous gods gave rise to a large black cloud on the horizon. Thunder god Thor was leading it while exchanging blows with Ares. The spear in Ares' hands repeatedly clashed with Mjolnir, causing sparks to fly. Brunhilde's face turned red in front of Hera. Her divine spear was unable to display its strength, regardless of how formidable it was. It could destroy everything, but Hera's divine whip was also condensed from the essence of heaven and earth and was using its flexibility to conquer strength. The whole world was in complete turmoil, making Li Yunmu gasp in admiration. Various gods had appeared, but none of them belonged to the ancient China. It seemed like Chinese gods were quite low-pitched in the origin world. Li Yunmu was thinking about going to help Brunhilde when he got trapped by the Egyptian gods. Your opponent is us, youngster. Today is the day you die. If you aren't willing to use your full strength, be ready to surrender your little life. A glimmer of bloodthirstiness appeared on Ra's face. He seemed to want to devour Li Yunmu right there and then. Li Yunmu was quite worried and constantly yelled his heart, "Hello! Have you really died? Didn't you hear the words of these people? They intend to kill me, and you still won't come out to help me? If I die, you won't be in a good condition either. From then on, you can remain dormant eternally, unable to return to the origin world." But the system seemed to have crashed. It was completely unresponsive. Li Yunmu was left speechless. I can only rely on myself now, damn it. Dark state. Li Yunmu yelled loudly. His words were filled with imposing manner, giving a fright to the three Egyptian gods surrounding him who thought that Li Yunmu was about to start attacking. But none of them knew that it was only false bravado. Li Yunmu had no way to really transform. He hastily waved his hands and sighed, "Three great gods, give me the opportunity, and I will immediately transform." The foreheads of the three Egyptian gods filled with sweat. The youngster shouldn't be playing a joke on the three of them, right? But they still looked at Li Yunmu with ridicule in their gazes, like they were watching a clown. Li Yunmu's face turned red and he continued to shout with a deadpan expression, "Dark state! Dark state! Dark state! Dark state!" Li Yunmu's face filled with embarrassment, and he coughed 2 times. "I think it is because of you three great gods. Your force field is influencing me, and I am unable to exert my full strength. But you three want to have a wonderful battle, right? Then you need to give me the opportunity. You turn around, and I will certainly be successful." The three Egyptian gods looked at each other and smiled. Even if they gave him the opportunity, so what? He, a sheep about to be slaughtered, what tricks could he play? When the three Egyptian gods looked away, Li Yunmu instantly turned into a cicada who had shed its carapace. He had no way to deal with the ancient gods since the system was still dormant, so fighting against the three Egyptian gods would be like striking a stone with an egg. The three Egyptian gods detected movement and turned around. "Damned youngster, unexpectedly playing tricks on us. Grab him and kill him." The three Egyptian gods' strength was far more tyrannical than that of Li Yunmu. It was impossible for him to escape from their clutches. In less than a heartbeat, Li Yunmu was overtaken by the three. "Smelly youngster, you dared to trick us. I see that you are tired of living and are courting death. The three great gods, I am not myself today. Can we battle again another day?" Osiris angrily punched Li Yunmu's face, almost deforming him. Bang! One punch forced Li Yunmu to retreat a few meters. If it were not because he was a half-god, his body would have fallen apart. If he was still immortal, it would have shattered into pieces from the god's punch. Li Yunmu hoped that the system would bounce out cursing him at that moment and show its ability to defeat the enemy. But the damned system seemed to have suddenly died. He had already been calling it for a long time, but it didn't answer. It was quite embarrassing, if being truthful. If he didn't delay using tricks on the 3 Egyptian gods, he might have already died. Li Yunmu was gasping for breath. It was useless whether he ran or not. It seemed like he could only battle like a Scandinavian. Running away was simply not how a man should act. The 3 Egyptian gods sneered at him. "Youngster, you are still not running? Hera called us 3 brothers in order to kill you. Die under our hands. Youngster, you should calmly sleep for eternity." Hearing the opponent's provocation, Li Yunmu tightly clenched his jaw. Who said he couldn't fight? Weren't they just 3 Egyptian gods? Their daddy would chop them down to pieces one by one. Li Yunmu lifted the divine cyan blade and took a deep breath. "Do you want to fight? Your daddy will play with you a little." The 3 Egyptian gods smiled at each other. The half-god before them was still acting recklessly while facing imminent death. He surprisingly still dared to boast. Li Yunmu suddenly looked at the sky and shouted out, "Look! Frisbee!" The 3 gods lifted their heads and looked at the sky. Suddenly they sensed a wave of wind streak past them. When they looked at Li Yunmu again, he had already ran far away. Li Yunmu kept running despite his heavy breathing. While gasping for air, he said, "Your daddy is only a half-god, so how could he possibly be an opponent to you 3 ancient gods? Damned system is hibernating again, so not running is equal to death. I am not an idiot." Li Yunmu was very tired from running, but the 3 Egyptian gods were not going to leave him alone. This made him feel despair. The 3 Egyptian gods surrounded him, and Osiris' palm hit him in the face once more. "Continue to run. Smelly youngster," he screamed furiously. "Quickly look, what's that in the sky?" The 3 fantasy gods kicked Li Yunmu's belly. "Still trying to play tricks on us? Do you think we will get fooled again? Are you an idiot?" Li Yunmu smiled bitterly. "Your daddy was sure that you were retarded. I didn't think that you would catch up to the trick so quickly. You're truly worthy of being 3 great gods." Thud, thud, thud. 3 kicks landing on Li Yunmu, almost sending him flying. He crawled on the ground with his whole body injured, but the divine cyan blade in his hand was glowing with bright light. Li Yunmu took a deep breath and said, "Seems like I cannot run anymore. The time has come for me to act like a man and have a grand battle with you 3. Chapter 664, 4 Transformations. Li Yunmu hadn't finished speaking when a hint of ruthlessness flashed in his eyes. This caused the 3 Egyptian gods to suddenly become somewhat vigilant. The youth had changed all of a sudden. But the 3 fantasy gods who possessed tremendous amount of divine strength could easily neglect the slight change and the slight increase in his divine strength. Li Yunmu raised his divine cyan blade and suddenly struck down. He didn't care which of the 3 Egyptian gods was in front of him and struck down without seeing. "Violent blade, heavy leap strike," he yelled out. Before he even finished saying that, Li Yunmu shifted his complete focus on the divine cyan blade in his hand. Instantly, earth-shattering blade intent screamed and gathered on the blade's edge, displaying the power of heavens. He leaped in the air and dropped down, transforming the power of the blade into gravitational power and enormous force, which could instantly cleave through the enemy. Splitting the space, he struck down. But Earth God Geb used his arms, which were as hard as iron, to instantly obstruct him. Li Yunmu's complexion changed slightly when he saw Geb's punch advancing toward him like a tsunami. If it struck him, then not only would his body shatter into pieces, even his consciousness would disperse completely. Li Yunmu's body flickered in front of Geb's punch like a phantom and instantly transformed into 9 identical phantoms, giving the 3 Egyptian gods a headache. Li Yunmu was a thorny problem for them when he tried his best, but now he had formed 9 phantoms with 1 real body mixed in between them, which made it extremely difficult to distinguish between real and fake. Li Yunmu covertly rejoiced. "Experiencing your daddy's fierceness firsthand? Still won't surrender obediently? If your daddy showed his real strength, you would be beaten to a pulp." But in the eyes of Osiris, the 9 phantoms were simply a childish trick. He shouted loudly, and the sound wave instantly destroyed Li Yunmu's phantoms. Crap! Li Yunmu couldn't help but cry out in alarm. He had used Insect's step, of which he was most proud, but it surprisingly couldn't take even a single blow from the 3 Egyptian gods. They were truly terrifying. The strength of the 3 great gods couldn't be underestimated. When Li Yunmu had seen Zeus bringing them to Scandinavia, he knew that they had come for him. R.A., clad in his golden armor, sneered at Li Yunmu. "Youngster, this is the end for you. Receive the attack of my divine flame." Suddenly a terrifying red flame appeared in Ra's mouth, which instantly melted the snow in Land of Ice. Li Yunmu cleaved it with divine cyan blade, trying to dissipate the flame. But they had their own force and directly swallowed the energy from the divine cyan blade. Li Yunmu's complexion changed and he loudly shouted "Ah!" While he did so, an intense transformation suddenly began. His entire body was covered by a metal carapace. It was. Li Yunmu didn't dare to believe his eyes. Could it be that the system had come alive again? Shouldn't the transformation be something he couldn't use? If he used it, then there was certainly a price for it. What the hell was the system doing? Was it playing with him? Was there no condition, as long as he thought about it, he could change the transformation mode? While Li Yunmu was thinking about it, the flames engulfed him. But Li Yunmu covered in the metal suit wasn't afraid of them. His body shook, and the flames instantly dissipated. Upon seeing Li Yunmu's transformation, Osiris, Geb, and Ra looked at him in a different light. "Very good. Youngster, you are the first person to remain standing under my flame. Seemingly you do have the power to defeat Hades. But if you want to defeat the 3 of us with this little bit of strength, you are simply too unskilled." Ra sneered at Li Yunmu. Although the enemy had endured his flame, he still didn't put the half-god in his eyes. But Li Yunmu was completely indifferent toward it. Since he could use the different transformation modes, everything would be easy to deal with. Osiris breathed out heavily, and thunder began to collect in the sky. A thunderbolt descended the next moment, which was one of Osiris' 2 killing techniques. It was his first time using the skill. Li Yunmu was startled by the attack, and the metal suit covering his body dissipated. If he continued adorning it in front of a lightning attack, he would be done for. This metal suit's biggest weakness was lightning attribute energy. Li Yunmu entered stealth mode then. When the thunderbolt struck, it created a large crater in the middle of Land of Ice. Li Yunmu patted his chest, then said while with lingering fear, "Fortunately your daddy was smart. Otherwise, he would have been burnt to a crisp by you." Geb couldn't endure it anymore. When he saw the youngster dodge the attacks of his 2 companions, he could not restrain his anger. The youngster's luck was too good. He launched another punch filled with divine power. Li Yunmu smartly turned around, and several thorns suddenly sprung from his back. Geb's punch struck them, and he released a miserable howl. The 3 fantasy gods looked at each other in dismay. When did this person become so fierce? His body could surprisingly transform and these transformations could restrain their attacks. While sweat ran down the foreheads of the 3 Egyptian gods, Li Yunmu rushed forward. His hands transformed into metal claws, and he said to the 3 gods, "I am not the weak chicken you expected. Today I will defeat you, and you shouldn't feel regret." Wherever the metal claws went, regardless of how sturdy the stuff in their way, it would be sliced apart. The 3 Egyptian gods joined hands to erect a wall of energy in defense, but despite being almost indestructible, it was ripped apart by the metal claws. This guy. The 3 Egyptian gods were dumbstruck. Until just a moment ago, they had looked down on Li Yunmu. They had even constantly humiliated him. But now, it was as if he had been switched with someone else who had extraordinary strength. No wonder Zeus had said that this beast possessed another personality. So at that moment, they should be facing it, right? Even if the three Egyptian gods had planted themselves firmly on the ground, they were blown away after they were struck by the claws. Geb stood up painfully and suddenly laughed. "Youngster, you have already awakened the being in your body." Osiris also stood up with a sneer. "That's right, we have been waiting for a while. I hadn't expected that the being inside your body would take such a long time to be aroused. Ha 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 ha, youngster, do you think that you have experienced our true strength? We feared that you would get terrified if we showed it to you." Chapter 665, The Three Egyptian Gods. The words of the three Egyptian gods baffled Li Yunmu. But when he lifted his head, two enormous dragons suddenly appeared in the sky while a giant rose up on the ground. It made it obvious that the fight wasn't going to end soon. Ra's winged god dragon. The phoenix dragon soaring in the sky and constantly screeching was Ra's winged god dragon. Osiris sky dragon. Soaring in the sky with his body curled up, a blazing sky dragon bared its fangs. Geb's divine giant. The ice suddenly shattered beneath the feet of a giant. Its body seemed to be as high as the heavens, causing Li Yunmu to feel like an ant in front of its enormous silhouette. Its fists were covered with sharp spikes and its ruthless face made him appear more formidable than anyone else. What exactly were those? The beasts reared by the three Egyptian gods? Their strength was nothing formidable, so how formidable could their beasts be? Li Yunmu thought about that, but the next instant, he discovered that he was wrong. The winged god dragon spread its wings and soared through the sky. Suddenly, a sign flickering with golden light appeared on Ra's forehead, and he began to laugh crazily. "I will let you see how powerful I'll become after I and the winged god dragon fuse together." Upon seeing Ra's crazy appearance, Li Yunmu was startled. Could it be that the mythical creatures had formidable connection with the gods? Osiris also leaped upon his sky dragon and roared while sneering, "Summon Thunderbolt!" Above their heads, lightning streaked past the sky. Claps of thunder rang in the sky, awing everyone. Geb leaped onto the divine giant soldier and said with a cold sneer, "Receive the punishment of three Egyptian gods." Divine punch smash. When Li Yunmu saw the three gods join hands with their summoned beasts to attack together, he felt despair. The three Egyptian gods were. The return of Lin Yuero to Lucky Wind City raised the morale of the supreme transcending level experts. Their city could be regarded as rescued. When Li Da saw Li Tian, he threw himself into his embrace and said while weeping bitterly, "Brother, I have let you down. I let the city lord down. I have let all the flux experts in the city down. I have also let the vampires down. I am guilty." He knelt on the ground all of a sudden and said to Lin Yuero, "City Lord, I request you to punish me. Otherwise, I will find it difficult to calm my conscience. Because of me the leader of vampires was beheaded. I have let him down." Looking at Li Da who kept blaming himself, Lin Yuero took a deep breath and said, "Li Da, this won't solve anything. I have to first settle the difficulties encountered by Lucky Wind City and then we can talk about it. You made a mistake, so wait until Lucky Wind City is rescued from the crisis, then I will penalize you. Let me think calmly and properly about how to battle the enemy." Li Da wiped his tears and his gaze turned ruthless. "I request to let me go to battle. I want to kill them all until not even a piece of them remains. I will avenge the vampires," he roared. "Wars aren't fought like how you think," Lin Yuero said. "If all the warriors of Lucky Wind City went with you, they'd become scattered bones." Li Da's gaze turned dim. His eyes were full of hatred, and his heart of the thirst to kill enemies and avenge the leader of vampires. Lin Yuero knew that the mole was still hidden among them. The supreme transcending level experts were handpicked by Li Yunmu so there shouldn't be any problems. Li Da and Li Tian didn't even need to be mentioned, since they were shadows left behind by Li Yunmu. That only left behind the flux expert guards. Only they could slip out without being noticed. They were unlike supreme transcending level experts who didn't have the courage. Li Yunmu had nurtured them carefully, so it was impossible for them become so unscrupulous. Not many people knew that Lin Yuero had left Lucky Wind City, so searching for the mole should be quite easy. She could probably use false news to ferret them out. Li-Da ruthlessly slapped himself and said, "City Lord, what should we do now? The soldiers are at the city walls, so we have no alternative." Lin Yuero blinked slowly. She had actually thought of two plans in her heart. First plan was for the mole to hear, while the other plan for the Supreme Transcending Level experts. She planned to use the Supreme Transcending Level experts as ambush troops and turn the Flux experts into cannon fodder. This was all in preparation to catch the mole. Lin Yuero turned to Li-Da, paused for a moment, then said, "I will issue my command now, so all Flux experts in the city heed my words. I have already observed the situation, so launching an attack from the northern side is the most favorable for us. Dispatch a group of Flux experts to ambush them on the northern side. If you shall encounter them, launch an attack on them straight away." These words were for the mole. If they heard this information, they would certainly inform Frontline God, causing him to make a mistake. In the meantime, Lin Yuero would secretly dispatch people to follow the Flux experts. As long as someone left the city, they would immediately inform her and wouldn't allow the person to return. This was a precaution against the mole. After the surrounding Flux experts scattered, Lin Yuero spoke softly to Li-Da. "I'm sure that there's a mole in Lucky Wind City, and they informed the enemy about me leaving. Tonight, when the mole leaves the city, let them leave, but put to memory their facial features. Once they return, catch them. We will use the mole as bait to trap them." Mole. Bastard. So there was surprisingly a scoundrel in the city. Repulsive. If I knew who he was, I wouldn't let them go before dismembering their body into 10,000 pieces. I have made arrangements based on the information that there's a mole between us. Don't beat the grass and scare the snake. Calm down, I will certainly ensure the safety of those Flux experts. I have made additional preparations for that. But these matters can only be handed over to the Supreme Transcending Level experts who deserve my trust. Presently, I don't trust any of the Flux experts since it is highly possible that one of them is a mole." Hearing Lin Yuero's words, Li Tian and Li-Da glanced at each other. The mole was also probably the reason why Li Feng and Li Yun had been unable to return. Lin Yuero took a deep breath and said to everyone, "Everything will proceed according to the original plan. Scatter." Thereupon, Lucky Wind City began to move. The mole took advantage of the dead of the night and stealthily sneaked out of the city. But everything was monitored by the people dispatched by Li-Da, and they shut the gates of the city after the mole was gone. Chapter 666, Ambush. The mole hurried to the camp of Frontline God that very night and informed him about the news from Lucky Wind City. "God Master, that Lin Yuero has returned. Moreover, she also intends to prepare an ambush on the northern side of the city. You must take proper measures to counter it." "Ha ha ha, good job. I have been truly careless." Lin Yuero was surprisingly able to walk out of the mythical realm alive. "I wonder, how did she do it?" That night, the mole didn't leave Frontline God's camp but hurriedly went back at dawn. However, the instant he returned to Lucky Wind City, a few Flux experts were waiting for him at the gate of the city, led by Li-Da. "You traitor! Capture him!" Hearing Li-Da's accusation, that mole's whole body went soft. "General, what are you saying? What am I guilty of?" he asked. Li-Da was enraged when seeing the undaunted appearance of the mole. Perhaps it was this person who was the reason why the leader of the vampires was annihilated. When that thought crossed his mind, Li-Da punched the mole in the belly while gnashing his teeth. "Still playing dumb, I see. If not for you betraying us to Frontline God, would the leader of vampires have died? I will avenge him today," he shouted loudly. The Flux experts at his side hurriedly tried to dissuade him, seeing that Li-Da was being impulsive. "General, don't be hasty. Please wait for City Lord to make a decision. I cannot endure this. I want this traitor dead." The Flux experts tried to drag Li-Da away, but he was extremely powerful. He threw them away and aggressively moved towards the mole. At that moment, Lin Yuero appeared. "Stay your hand," she ordered. When Li Da heard her words, he halted and said, "He is a traitor, so would it matter if I killed him? If not for him, the leader of vampires wouldn't have." Whenever he thought about it, Li Da felt a stab in his heart. Lin Yuero could comprehend Li Da's mental state and indifferently replied, "We cannot kill him right now. If we did, it would raise the suspicions of frontline god. First arrest him. I have a different use for him." Li Da groaned and retreated, clearly very unsatisfied with this result. Li Tian then promptly apologized to Lin Yuero. "Sorry, City Lord. My second elder brother has been quite saddened by the death of the leader of vampires. I understand, and I won't penalize him. Li Tian, you should remain clear-headed. Do you think we should kill him? If we do so, who will lead us to your other brothers?" Li Tian was slightly startled. "You are saying that this mole knows about the whereabouts of my brothers?" Lin Yuero nodded. "Since he is a mole, he must have reported whereabouts of Li Feng and Li Yun to Frontline God, and Frontline God must have locked them up somewhere. Although they are Li Yun Mu's shadows and won't die, it is impossible that Frontline God will let them return to Lucky Wind City. That would only increase his headache." Upon hearing Lin Yuero's analysis, Li Tian nodded, implying that he understood. "City Lord sees everything. Then we will proceed with the original plan. I reckon that Frontline God himself won't take any risks. He will certainly request the people of divine religion to lead the charge. At that time, we will surround and annihilate divine religion, causing internal strife among them. After all, the news they received yesterday was wrong, which will influence the state of war greatly." "Understood. City Lord, I will go and prepare," Li Tian said calmly. At noon, they began to plan. Lin Yuero dispatched a group of flux experts as bait to launch an ambush. However, she had long ago placed even more flux experts and supreme transcending experts in another place, from which she could swallow the people that would come to ambush the bait group. After the time it takes for an incense to burn, the Pope of Divine Religion dispatched people as expected, and another group of soldiers came to surround the enemy post waiting to attack the reinforcements. Not only did the group of ambushers surrounded the enemy, they sent another group of soldiers to cut off their path of retreat. But everything had been seen through by Lin Yuero. When the Pope was about to attack, his people were besieged from all sides. The group of flux experts whom they had surrounded came out from their cover, and the supreme transcending experts as well as more flux experts who had been lying in wait for a long time in the surroundings also came out. In a moment, the Pope was struck dumb. The order had been given to him by Frontline God. Last time, the information regarding vampires coming out of the city to request for soldiers hadn't been wrong, so how could there be such an excessive mistake at this time? "Pope, what should we do? We seem to have fallen into their trap. This ambush was only a bait." Pope's body shuddered slightly. Sure enough, just the addition of one Lin Yuero had caused Lucky Wind City to become completely different. "Retreat! Quickly retreat!" he promptly shouted. The people of divine religion staked their lives to come out of the encirclement. The people from Lucky Wind City could decimate the soldiers of divine religion completely, but Li Tian commanded everyone back. "Follow the city lord's command. Don't continue the chase, return, follow the plan." But Li Da didn't hear it. Leading a small squad, he still engaged the people of divine religion in close combat. If it were not for Li Tian personally obstructing him, he wouldn't have stopped until there was not a single enemy alive. But Li Tian knew that this would harm Lin Yuero's big plan and stopped Li Da in his tracks. "Brother, why are you stopping me? It's because of the ambush of these people of divine religion that the vampires were annihilated." Thinking of this, Li Da felt a stab of pain in his heart. The leader of vampires had died for Lucky Wind City. Such loyalty could never be repaid. "Brother, I understand your mood, but you are being impulsive right now. Hatred covers your eyes, so how can you see the big picture? You would only delay City Lord's plans. This is not revenge but courting death. You should have trust in City Lord. She will definitely avenge the vampires. It's only a matter of time. Don't tell me you don't trust City Lord. Hearing Li Tian's words, Li Da threw away the weapon in his hand and said, "Brother, your words are correct. I cannot ruin City Lord's plans. Brother, I was mistaken, your words are correct. You need to learn to restrain yourself first. Only then will you be able to see the big picture. Otherwise, you will never advance. When Master returns, I want him to see a changed you." Li Da nodded deeply and returned to Lucky Wind City with all of the supreme transcending level experts and other fluxers. Chapter 667, Awakening. After the three Egyptian gods joined their summoned beasts to attack together, a triangular energy ray rushed toward Li Yunmu. This attack was much more formidable than that one used by Ares and the other two gods. The extremely frightening thing, however, was that at that instant, Li Yunmu couldn't use the power of the dark state. It meant that it was basically impossible for him to defend himself. The three Egyptian gods had been extremely difficult to deal with before, but once they summoned their beasts it became even worse. The strength of the beasts was proportional to the strength of the three gods. When faced with the attack, which was a combination of three, it could be said that regardless of what mode Li Yunmu transformed into, he would be unable to protect himself. He could only switch to one form at a time, so how could he even use it to defend? Damned system, if you still don't resurrect, I will truly have a disastrous ending. If I die, you will also disappear. His words were finally effective and instantly awakened the system, who reminded Li Yunmu, the only ability which host can use right now is Shadow Carapace. Use it to escape with your life. After hearing the system's reminder, Li Yunmu changed into a shell while his true body dashed away at an extremely fast speed. The attack of three Egyptian gods shattered the carapace into pieces. If it were not for Li Yunmu using a life-saving technique, he would have met with a bad ending. Relying on his little bit of strength, how could he fight against the three Egyptian gods? Wasn't fate just teasing him? The system hopes that host will keep fleeing for the time being, because you aren't their enemy, the system said coldly. Crap, you awakened only to say this? Didn't you defeat the Heavenly Gods Council previously? So how are you unable to match the three of them? Aren't you a fake system? For insulting the system, the host will suffer a penalty. Your junior will be curtailed. Noticing that the system was bantering with him, Li Yunmu became enraged and roared at it. You are too troublesome. Quickly switch and deal with the enemy in front of us. Seeing Li Yunmu's earnest appearance, the system couldn't help but remind him, host already possesses the great devouring technique, so why are you scared of those heavenly gods? What power cannot you absorb? When Li Yunmu heard the system's advice, his eyes began to shine. The system was correct, he possessed the tyrannical great devouring technique, so why was he afraid of the three Egyptian gods? What sort of power couldn't he absorb within a split second? He might even be able to use it to defend himself and counterattack. When the three Egyptian gods saw that their combined attack had been easily avoided by Li Yunmu, they felt that something was fishy. Ra sneered and said, "Humph, can you only use these sort of inferior tricks to escape? Don't tell me you don't have the courage to face our attacks. Do you think that I am an idiot like you? Who wouldn't dodge after seeing the enemy use their unique ability?" Osiris snorted at him. "Youngster, you are far too unbridled. You are the first one to have enraged us to this extent." Li Yunmu coldly sneered in reply. "All of us are gods here, so why would I be respectful towards you?" Geb burst out laughing. "Youngster, you are only a half-god. You know what level of gods are we? We are 2 levels higher than you." Li Yunmu curled his lips into a smile and said, "Your strength doesn't depend upon your level, but how much power you have." While saying that, his strength rose to the extreme. The rise of his strength shocked the three gods. The half-god before them, how could he possibly possess such power? It was completely unreasonable. But this rise in strength was actually due to the assistance of the system. Moreover, Li Yunmu had only said half of his words before. And the strength contained inside the body is less important than how you use it. Although Li Yunmu's strength had already reached the level of master gods, which were 2 levels higher compared to the ancient gods in front of him, the 3 Egyptian gods were unable to believe it. How could a half-god like Li Yunmu could have concealed such formidable strength? System sneered. Using the power of this old man to put a false front in front of these ancient god. Your own strength counts only for a fart if you cannot use it. After being criticized by the system, Li Yunmu snorted and said, at least it could be used to cower them. Once they have apprehensions against me, I can discover their weaknesses and defeat them. Otherwise, if they staked their all, the only one eating the loss would be me. The system then silently agreed to raise Li Yunmu's strength to the limit. The 3 Egyptian gods were dumbstruck. Even the gazes of their summoned beasts contained some fear. Ra promptly used his arms to stop the attack and said while gnashing his teeth, how is this possible? Is this the true power of the being concealed in your body? Osiris took a deep breath. Could it be that Zeus' words were true? Is there really another personality concealed in his body? Geb was staring at Li Yunmu with a rigid gaze. He could see a silhouette which terrified him inside the young man's body. That is. Geb, what is it? What do you see? Geb's body trembled uncontrollably, and he said while continuously shaking his head, and nothing. I must have seen wrong. Definitely. Ra and Osiris noticed Geb's abnormal reaction, and they also felt quite uneasy in their hearts. They didn't want to become the next Hades. When they looked at each other, Geb said, how about we retreat first? Geb, why have you become so terrified? Do you want the heavenly gods' council to look down on us 3 Egyptian gods? Ra demanded in anger. At Ra's furious roar, fear involuntarily rose in the depths of Geb's heart. He didn't know whether what he had seen just then was true or false. The being concealed in the youngster's body could be him. When Osiris saw Geb's terrified appearance, he couldn't help but knit his brows. Geb, what exactly is going on with you today? What was it that you saw back there? Geb wasn't completely certain about it, so he didn't reply to the other 2 gods and indifferently said, I propose that we retreat for the time being. If we continue to get tangled up with this person, it will be extremely unfavorable for us. Chapter 668, Suspicion. When the people of divine religion escaped with great difficulty from mortal danger, many of the troops grumbled in anger. Frontline God has always had incredible foresight, so how could he suddenly give such wrong information? Pope was ashen-faced. Either that Linuero of Lucky Wind City truly wasn't simple or Frontline God had used this opportunity to eliminate divine religion. Once he wiped out Lucky Wind City by himself, he would become a hegemon on Earth. Pope would rather believe the first possibility than the second. Yet Linuero had just returned, so it shouldn't have been possible for her to know the full situation of Lucky Wind City. Presently, it was like a sheet of loose sand. Frontline God's mole was still in the city, so even if Linuero was more intelligent than they gave her credit for, it was still impossible for her to figure everything out. That only left the second possibility. Frontline God should have decided to send divine religion to its death. First time, when ambushing the vampires, he should have had the same intention, but the vampires were very weak compared to divine religion and couldn't pose a threat to them, so his plan had failed. In the second ambush, he had again dispatched divine religion. This time, it was attacked by Lucky Wind City. Frontline God had to have deliberately given them the wrong information to coerce them into Lucky Wind City's trap. After thinking up to that point, Pope grabbed his head. Frontline God was actually scheming to eliminate him. It was impossible for him to sit and wait for his death, so Pope had to make Frontline God pay a price for his actions. He couldn't be allowed to become the hegemon of Earth. The Pope's heart was filled with suspicion and anger. He couldn't believe anyone anymore. Pope, you should quickly make a decision. This frontline god, what exactly does he want to do? Should we ask him first? After agreeing to collaborate, now they are scheming behind our backs? What exactly does he want? After hearing his disciples' resentful complaints, the Pope laughed coldly. I will naturally find frontline god to talk. I have wronged everyone in the matter of today's ambush. Henceforth, all the matters of my divine religion will no longer be influenced by frontline heavens. The disciples of divine religion felt quite relieved after hearing Pope's words. Finally they got an explanation. If they encountered such a danger in the future, their divine religion would be completely wiped out like the vampires, which was a very terrifying thought. Pope led most of his high-level experts to the camp. Frontline God was still extremely cordial towards Pope and said with a slight smile, Pope, you came. I wanted to talk to you about this matter. Today, sending you all for an ambush was a lapse in my judgment. Next time, I will definitely not make such a mistake. Pope smiled coldly at him. Who knows whether it was done deliberately by you, frontline God? I have always respected you as a man and wanted to cooperate with you, but you conspired against divine religion. What exactly did you mean by it? Frontline God repeatedly shook his head. Pope, you misunderstand. The information I received from the inside was that there would be an ambush. Humph, you only said half of the information. There is still another half that you haven't said. The plan was for our divine religion to substitute your frontline heavens on the road to doom. Frontline God's eyes widened. He grew even more confused than before and hurriedly said, Pope, what are you saying? Frontline heavens have always conducted themselves in an honest and upright manner, so how could we possibly conspire against you? I suspect that my mole has been discovered and Linuero has used him to feed us wrong information. Frontline God sneered coldly. Stop trying to make excuses. That Linuero just returned to Lucky Wind City, so how could she learn about your mole so quickly? You think I don't know how careful you are? Frontline God found it difficult to dispute it because he could see that Pope had already decided that he was the enemy of their divine religion. Frontline God, today either the fish will die or the net will split. Since you wanted to destroy us, we will fight until both of us are obliterated. Seeing Pope's people being aggressive towards Frontline God, his people hurriedly moved to protect him. Both sides engaged in a fierce battle. Frontline God stopped talking and looked at Pope as if he was looking at a dead person. If the cooperation loses trust, then the cooperation cannot continue, he said furiously. Humph, I also think that. It is impossible for me to hand over divine religion that I built up from my blood and sweat to a person who I feel can turn into a backstabber at any time. Regardless of whether you believe it or not, I truly haven't done anything. Perhaps everything is a conspiracy of that girl Linuero. Stop making excuses in the name of that girl. How could a silly little girl pull this off? I can see that you wanted to eliminate all the other factions after eliminating Lucky Wind City. From today onwards, all the ties between your frontline heavens and my divine religion are broken. Seeing Pope determined to sever all relations between them, Frontline God could do nothing besides letting him go. At that moment, one of his subordinates suddenly said in a low voice, "Why don't we eliminate them? If we let them go today, tomorrow they will turn into our enemies." Frontline God sighed. "This is what I was thinking. Since your divine religion asked for it, then don't blame us." During the return journey, Pope had actually guessed that Frontline God would send people to assassinate him. This was his style of handling things. But Pope was prepared for it. On the surface, it appeared that he had only brought a few people, but in the vicinity, many flux experts were lying low to ambush them. If Frontline God truly dared to attack him, those concealed flux experts would definitely catch their attackers unprepared. At that time, not only would Frontline God, but probably the entire Frontline heavens would fall into a crisis. Pope took a deep breath. He could hear someone pursuing them. He knew that what he had been thinking had come true. It confirmed that the person who had thrown the people of divine religion in a pit was definitely Frontline God. The experts of Frontline Heavens went after Pope and his people to kill them. But they had not anticipated that many experts of divine religion would be hidden in the vicinity and would then jump out to surround them. Pope coldly sneered upon stopping and looking behind him. Frontline God, you thought that this old man wouldn't take any precautions against you? You are too naive. The experts of Frontline Heavens were dumbstruck. Pope had surprisingly been on guard against them. Chapter 669, A Trick or Two. When Pope looked at the people from Frontline Heavens, he was unable to restrain his anger. So you were really pretending in front of me. Now you have finally revealed your true colors. Didn't your Frontline God say that you people do everything in an honest and truthful manner? Pope ruthlessly stabbed his scepter into the chest of one of the flux experts of Frontline Heavens. That single attack was enough to send that flux expert close to his death. He instantly felt faint and lost consciousness. When Frontline God, who was at the gate of Lucky Wind City, heard the news, he was stumped for words. When divine religion confirmed their hypothesis, they were naturally going to launch a formidable counterattack at Frontline Heavens. The people of divine religion instantly attacked, and Frontline God led Frontline Heavens to meet the attack. The two sides began to fight outside Lucky Wind City. Frontline God still tried to persuade Pope. Is it worth the trouble? Because of your actions, Lucky Wind City will be the fisherman reaping all the profits. Pope sneered at him. Frontline God, today you will die. You just need to wait with your hands tied. Ridiculous. Pope, you do know that if Lucky Wind City dispatches some people right now, we will all be finished. I would rather fall into the hands of Lucky Wind City than allow you to become the overlord of Earth. I won't allow your trickery to prevail. Upon hearing Pope spout such crazy words, Frontline God was completely shocked. Pope was truly a complete idiot. He might as well have been handing over all the advantages he had obtained to Lucky Wind City. What level of stupidity was this? Clearly, that earlier matter hadn't been his fault. But Pope wasn't willing to overlook or spare him. Because of a misunderstanding, the two sides engaged in a battle leading to the present situation. Frontline God felt some regret. Wasn't this the so-called one wrong step leads to more mistakes? He was no longer able to persuade Pope to turn around and could only accept the situation. At that moment, troops appeared at the gates of Lucky Wind City. They looked at the battle between Frontline God and Pope as if they were watching a play. Frontline God and Pope stopped their fight and looked at the female figure gazing at them from some distance away. Seeing them, the woman gave a faint smile. Two leaders of different factions who began to battle each other for personal interest. This violates all principles of military strategy. Both of you need to wash your necks and get ready. Linuero didn't advocate the use of force. Her flux experts and supreme transcending level experts surrounded Frontline Heavens and divine religion from all sides. They had clearly come prepared. Frontline God and Pope fell into despair. You placed a mole in my city, and I used a little trick for you to begin suspecting one another. Just a trick or two from me caused you to suspect, mistrust, and even fight against each other. Even if you join hands, you aren't an opponent of my Lucky Wind City. Linuero said indifferently. Frontline God and Pope were startled upon hearing her words. This was the true meaning of utter defeat. The girl had somehow already gotten everything under control. It seemed like he had been patiently biding her time. Once they started infighting, she took advantage of the opportunity. Actually, Pope had guessed that it might be a possibility, but at that time, he was being chased by Frontline Heavens and thought that Frontline God was the true enemy. Linuero had predicted all of that a long time ago. Right then, the troops of Frontline Heavens and Divine Religion were waiting quietly for Lucky Wind City to deal with them. Who could have thought that Geb would become terrified suddenly? It was completely opposite to his usual style. Ra and Osiris couldn't help but feel apprehensive. What exactly was going on there? How could the youngster in front of them suddenly turn into a monster? It was completely abnormal, and Ra couldn't accept it. He angrily yelled, "Why exactly are you terrified of him?" But Geb had already turned around and left. Ra, however, didn't intend to let Li Yunmu go, even if the power released by him just a moment ago was quite formidable. As the leader of the three Egyptian gods, I will certainly kill you today. Ra had already united with the winged god dragon, and a ball of flame suddenly came out from its mouth. That flame attack didn't possess any threat towards him in Li Yunmu's eyes. He simply devoured the raging flames. Once there wasn't even a trace of them left, Ra was completely dumbstruck. How was that possible? The youth had surprisingly. Ra couldn't help but gulp while Osiris on his sky dragon furiously shouted, summoning Thunderbolt. Another lightning bolt fell from the sky, but it was also devoured by Li Yunmu. Osiris and Ra were dumbstruck. How could this person devour the powers of others? How could he possibly be a half-step god when he clearly was? After devouring their powers, Li Yunmu attacked them using them. The sky dragon instantly fell down to the land of ice. The winged dragon god, in the meantime, went alight with flames. The three Egyptian gods were startled. Was that the youngster's ability? It was simply too terrifying. But Ra still sinisterly looked at Li Yunmu. He had already gone crazy. Winged dragon god charged into the sky with his entire body on fire like a phoenix. Ha 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 ha, the winged dragon god is a phoenix. It won't ever be defeated. Li Yunmu indifferently smiled and said, "True. It was unexpectedly a phoenix, but in front of me, it still cannot resist a single blow." You. Ra furiously gazed at Li Yunmu. Geb stopped and tried to persuade him, "We aren't his opponents. I've noticed this some time ago." Osiris stood up with difficulty. "But even he cannot save Scandinavia right now." Osiris' words were very strange, and Li Yunmu couldn't help but look at Scandinavia. Not far from them, Scandinavian God Council and Heavenly Gods Council were fighting with each other. At that moment, many ancient gods suddenly appeared all around them. Ra stood up and said, "What day is today? Surprisingly so many of them have gathered." Li Yunmu was faintly startled, since he hadn't seen those ancient gods before. Who were they? Were they also the enemy of Scandinavia? Chapter 670, Conspiracy. An enormous god, as large as Odin, appeared in the sky above Scandinavia. By then, the entire land of ice had transformed into a battlefield filled with smoke. Li Yunmu tightly knitted his brows and promptly asked the system, "Who exactly are they?" "They are also ancient gods. Today is really lively, so many ancient gods had appeared all of a sudden. I fear that all of this is a conspiracy." Conspiracy? Li Yunmu narrowed his eyes, suddenly remembering that Underworld Serpent had met him for a collaboration. Could the newcomer gods be part of whatever Underworld Serpent had planned? When he thought of this, Li Yunmu took a deep breath. Scandinavia could be considered to have invited a major trouble. He had wanted to draw support from Scandinavia's strength, at least until he could build a foundation for himself in the origin world. But after he joined it, it became a target for everyone. The ancient gods from all factions did their utmost to deal with Scandinavia. Perhaps because Li Yunmu defeated Hades, he attracted the attention of all ancient gods. Li Yunmu turned around and threw himself into the battle in the sky above Scandinavia, but he was obstructed by Ra's winged dragon god. "Still want to run? We haven't decided the outcome of battle yet. Do you believe that us three are pushovers?" Li Yunmu looked at him indifferently. "I don't have to continue playing with you anymore. I can clearly see that the Grand God isn't focused only on Scandinavia, but Heavenly Gods Council as well. Since your relations with Heavenly Gods Council is pretty good, don't tell me you aren't going to deal with the enemy who is attacking it first." Geb, who stood on the shoulder of the divine giant, jumped down and stopped Ra. His words are right. Not to mention that given our strength, it is basically impossible for us to defeat him. Even if the winged dragon god is a phoenix, it can only be used as cannon fodder. In front of absolute strength, we can only lose, he said with a grim face. Ra snorted, and his gaze fell on Osiris. Clearly, he was inquiring for his opinion. If Osiris also didn't have the will to fight, then he also wouldn't have the impetus to continue battling. It would be better to do as Li Yunmu said and first help Scandinavia and Heavenly Gods Council to settle their difficulties. Osiris nodded and said, I feel that their arrival is somewhat strange. Let's first return and take a look at what exactly has happened. When Li Yunmu saw that the three Egyptian gods wouldn't continue to find trouble with him, he was no longer worried and quickly flew towards Scandinavia. Originally, Athena was extremely worried about Brunhilde, but when the color of the sky turned dusky, the Heavenly Gods Council and Scandinavian God Council stopped battling. Because they were surrounded by unfamiliar ancient gods from all sides. It could be said that only master gods stood above the origin world, but no one knew how exactly the Indian ancient gods had awakened their master god. This is... Zeus' eyes almost bulged out from their sockets. He had never expected to see all the ancient gods gathered in the fight. What was happening that surprisingly all of them had come? Lord Brahma. When Hera looked at the god in front of her, fear appeared in her eyes. Lord Brahma was the only master god in the whole origin world who was not lying dormant. The sudden appearance of a master god had caused both Scandinavian God Council and Heavenly Gods Council to feel dread. When Odin saw Lord Brahma, he could be said to have given up. Clearly, the gods around them had come prepared. Though who exactly could have awakened him? This was worth consideration. At that moment, Zeus' face was deathly white. He had planned to fight to the death, but with the appearance of Lord Brahma, if they continued to fight Scandinavia until one of them was destroyed, it would be tantamount to giving Lord Brahma the opportunity to unify the entire origin world. As someone who wanted to become a master god and make the Heavenly Gods Council become the ruler of origin world, how could Zeus submissively hand over such an opportunity to someone else? He gnashed his teeth and said, "Stop fighting Scandinavia. Stay your hand for me, let's see what exactly these Indian gods intend to do. If they want to exterminate our Heavenly Gods Council and Scandinavian God Council, we will join hands with Scandinavia." The Heavenly Gods Council didn't dare to disobey Zeus' command. In the meantime, the Scandinavian God Council heard Odin's arrangements, which were exactly the same. They all wanted to see whether Lord Brahma wanted to unify the origin world or not. Lord Brahma did not say anything. Although he had appeared in the sky overhead, he was standing still with his eyes half closed. The masked man appeared between the two sides and suddenly said, "We heard that the secret genetic code is in your hands. Hand it over, and we will consider letting you go." Underworld Serpent. You surprisingly dared to scheme against Heavenly Gods Council. Zeus looked at the head of Underworld Serpent with some astonishment. The man shrugged at him. You have been in the origin world for long. Don't tell me you don't know that the winner takes all? You should have realized the disparity between ancient gods and master gods. If you choose to set yourselves against us, it won't be of any advantage to anyone. But if you hand over the secret genetic code to us, Lord Brahma won't take his fury out on you. Cold sweat kept pouring down the foreheads of Zeus and Odin. They had no idea how Underworld Serpent could have awakened Lord Brahma. He was the first master god to be awakened. The master gods in the origin world could be counted on one hand. Since one of them had been awakened, the origin world would definitely descend into chaos once more. Odin took a deep breath and said, "My friend, when did thou awaken? With thou's presence, the origin world won't be too peaceful." The Indian gods surrounded them on all sides bode ill for the Heavenly Gods Council and Scandinavian God Council. But at that moment, Li Yunmu suddenly appeared in the sky with a loud yell. Explosive thunder heavy kick. Li Yunmu rotated his legs like a whirlwind and closed in on an Indian ancient god. The sky of the land of ice was dusky, but the humongous Indian gods were quite glamorous. The Indian ancient god wasn't blown away by the sudden kick. Instead, the attack, which neither hurt nor tickle, only caused him to retreat a few steps and coldly glare over. Li Yunmu could sense the coldness from the ancient god. He seemed to be itching to rip to shreds. Just as Li Yunmu thought about making his move, without waiting for him to attack, the Indian ancient god's palm landed on his weak body.